Okay, in this next segment, what we want to do is look at some theoretical perspectives that will help us understand the crisis situation. If you've been doing your reading in your textbook, you know that there's some discussion in there of different counseling approaches that you can take. There's a discussion of psychoanalytic theory, good old Sigmund Freud. What do you remember about Freud? Karen?
Oedipus complex.
Oedipus complex. Okay, what else? A lot of focus on what? The conscious or?
The subconscious.
Okay, the subconscious and even the unconscious. Parts of experiences that are deeply embedded and buried in our memory banks, and so forth. The id, the ego, the superego. Okay, you remember what the id is? Those no, you've heard this stuff. Okay, and we're just going to lightly touch on this. The id is that impulsive, animalistic part of yourself that just wants to do its own thing. The superego, the rules and constraints of society. And so the superego constrains the id, and you come up with an ego, which is yourself. And this, we talk about ego, we're going to be talking about ego states in a little while in conjunction with another approach. But ego is a word that's just permeates our vocabulary now, and we're very concerned about self-concept and self-esteem and those kinds of things. And a lot of this has its roots in Freud. And while most counselors, as far as I know, don't spend a lot of time hypnotizing people and stretching them out on the sofa, probing their past at great length, there are those instances where this is appropriate. And we used in Lesson 1 the term trans-crisis to refer to crises that keep emerging over time. We'll talk later on about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, Vietnam vets being one example of that. Sexually abused children. People that have had traumas early on in life may have those repressed. Well, it's out of psychoanalytic theory that we get a lot of this terminology that we use in psychology today: repression, ego states, some focus on the libido and sexual drives and those kinds of things. There's directive counseling theory. There's non-directive counseling theory. Well, which one's right? You know, it's kind of like communication theories. Why don't we pick the best one and dump the other 90 or whatever? But it depends on what you're looking for and what you need. And remember those words lethality and mobility that we used back in Lesson 1? If the person is not mobile, they're in shock, they're immobile, then you need a much more directive approach than you do if the person is stressed, in crisis, but capable of looking at their choices and making their own decisions. And so that's a non-directive approach. Okay, we're going to look at system theory for just a minute because it's a widely applicable theory, and we can define a system as a set of parts or objects that are structured and interrelated. They form a unique whole. They're in an environment set apart by a boundary and usually open, not closed. And for our purposes, we'll be talking about open systems. A closed system would be something like your wristwatch that's battery operated. And once you put the battery in, then the watch keeps on running, you know, whether you wear it or not, whether you drop it on the ocean floor and it keeps on ticking or takes a licking or whatever the case may be. But as far as people are concerned, we're open systems. We have exchange with the environment. So let's look at some characteristics of systems and see how these parts work together. Okay, first of all, we said it's a set of parts or objects that are structured and interrelated, and they make up a unique whole. So wholeness is the first characteristic that we are talking about of a system. You have parts in your body but they all have to be together and working for you to be you. Your automobile hopefully runs, but if the mechanic disassembles it all over the garage, then you've got parts that are not a whole. It's not the same. A much simpler example would be something like a jigsaw puzzle. You have 500 pieces, but you put those together, and then you have a whole and you have a picture. And if there's even one piece of the puzzle missing, it's not quite right. It's not whole. So there are things that you get when you take a set of parts of objects and put parts or objects and put them together, whether it's ingredients for a pizza, jigsaw puzzle pieces, human body parts, automobile parts. And then this becomes analogous when we move over and look at families, for example. How do you know what a family is? Well, it's a set of parts or objects. They're structured, interrelated. Okay, interrelated leads us to this notion of interdependence. Karen?
I was just thinking that because I was thinking to myself, what's the difference between roommates who share an apartment versus a family living in an apartment? And of course, it's that interdependence. Because of course, characteristic of like college roommates is that other than other than maybe counting on each other to pay the rent, there's not a whole lot of other expectations about, influencing on each other's lives.
Okay, you may have some reciprocal agreements. We turn the radio off at a certain time. We keep the lights off. If we share a shower and bathroom, we work out a schedule. We have some agreements there. And we have mutual effect, or the roommates have mutual effect on one another. But it's not the same as a whole system where you have a set of parts and objects. And we'll see as we look at and move, starting next week as we move into situational crises and look at different ones of those, how this rippling effect occurs. Because in interdependence, if you've got, whether it's a family of 5 or a family of 10, A affects B, B affects C, C affects D, E, F, G, on down the line, whether there are 15 family members or 5 or only 3. But the more parts there are and the more interdependent they are, then the greater potential there is. Anytime something smacks one of those parts, it's like throwing a stone into water and you get this rippling effect. Did you want to add on something?
Yeah, I've only raised one child. I have a girlfriend who has 5. And we were talking about this once, about the fact that I interact with my one child, and that's, fairly simple system. Whereas in dealing, she was explaining to me that when you, of course, have 5 children, not only do the effect of your effect on each child, but that how you affect child A also seems to have some kind of a crossover effect to how A and B relate to each other. Mm-hmm. And you get all these other interlinking things that all get woven up together.
Okay, Robert?
I watched a show by John Bradshaw where he uses the dysfunctional family like a mobile, and how each part is dependent upon the other. So when he pushes, like there's a part of the mobile on this side that he'll mess with, it'll somehow affect some part of the mobile on this side. So I think that's part of the...
Right, and as we start to look at battering and alcoholism and substance abuse and health crises, these kinds of things, this rippling effect occurs. We had a fellow in crisis class one semester who was just Mr. Perfect. Okay, he just did everything right, but he was always telling us stories on his brother who had done everything wrong. And I mean, this guy'd been in trouble with the law, and he'd been in trouble with drugs, and he'd been in trouble with this. And finally somebody looked at the classmate, and said, "How is it you never did this?" And he said, "I just watched him get in trouble over and over and over. And whatever he did, I didn't do." And so in that case, it was a positive and constructive thing. But siblings watch each other, and sometimes they imitate the behavior, and they all get into trouble. And it's funny. I mean, I have 3 girls in 4 years, and they're all unique. And we've been amazed at that from time to time. I mean, they had the same parents in the same house, and they went to the same schools, and some of them even had the same teachers, and yet they have unique personalities. And none of them are perfect, but some think they're more perfect than one knows she got into more mischief than the others, and the whole family's agreed on that. And we may share those stories at some time. But you can't really say why. I mean, there are just too many factors that are in there and a part of that. But that interdependence is there, whether it's the one who's getting into mischief and making waves and so forth. Okay, a third characteristic of a system is equilibrium or balance. Somehow our system, and it's easier probably to think of yourself first. You know that you reach a point of exhaustion and you just have to go to sleep. It's just the way it is. You can only last so long. You may be able to diet or be hungry for a while, but you reach a point where food can, Maslow is right. You have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to breathe. When I went to the hospital, it was because I couldn't breathe. I was ready for some oxygen. Okay. But you have to keep your system in balance. And of course, now sometimes what we really need and what we want get a little confused. And I see a row of couch potatoes at my house in front of the third movie of the evening, and I would say, what are you doing here? Is all your homework done? Well, we need this. We just needed this break. But sometimes that's true. You are so stressed and so overworked that you need a refreshment of some sort. You need to leave town on vacation. You need to get away from it. But whatever is required, whether it's the car needing a tune-up, whether it's you needing a break, whether it's the family figuring out how they're going to restore balance, systems work to restore balance. Whatever it takes, they will seek that. Okay, systems are goal-seeking, and the official word for that is equifinality, but it simply means that that systems are, goal-seeking. And if the first approach doesn't work, the system will try something else. Kind of like a rat in a maze trying to get to the cheese. If the first path doesn't work, then they reroute and they try something else. Students may change their majors 4 or 5 times before they graduate because the goal is a degree. A family may try a variety of things trying to get a problem adolescent to get back in line and conform. And we'll get to compliance gaining strategies later on, but we try threats, we try bribes, we try punishments, we try coercion, begging, pleading, bargaining. What have I left out? We've got lots of options there. And different parents use different approaches, and some work with more or less success. Different approaches work with different people. You've got a number of factors that are going there. But we're goal-seeking people, and systems are goal-seeking, and so the system will change and adapt, which is number 6. But we'll change and adapt as we try to seek and pursue those goals. And it may mean that we have to change our values. We may go through an existential crisis that involves, it may be a change in politics, it may be a change in religion, it may be a change of attitude toward an issue like capital punishment or abortion or gun control, something that we thought we would hold as a value forever and forever, and something happens within the system that causes that to change. Okay, hierarchy we alluded to earlier. Anytime you get a system, some sort of power structure starts to fall out. And some sort of pecking order emerges. Now, some organizations or systems are very flat. This class has a very flat hierarchy right now. You have instructor, you have the instructor's assistant, and you have the people in the class. Now, theoretically, as soon as we give a first exam, which reminds me, all of you need to turn in your proctoring, so particularly you home viewing folks out there, we need to know where you are going to come to take your exam, whether you're going to join us here in the studio, whether you're going to Cinco Ranch. So Darren will have some company. Darren wants everybody to come to Cinco, right? You out there, Darren?
Come on out here.
Come on out there. Darren's a real cool guy. So those of you on the west side of town, go out there and join him. But you do have the option of going up to the North Campus too, and you should have received in your packets of information, a form to send in. But anyway, if you didn't get the form, call the West Houston Institute, the number of which is slipping me right now, but it'll flash on the screen at the end of the class, and let them know, get a form, send that in, and so forth. Okay, but we get a hierarchy, and what I started to say was, as soon as we have a set of grades, and some of you've made A's and some of you've made B's, and nobody's going to make any less than that because you're all going to review these tapes and study really hard, we'll have some sort of academic hierarchy in here. We could go around, seniors presumably have more status than freshmen and this sort of thing. But whatever the group is, they usually find a way to develop a pecking order and some sort of hierarchy. And it's just typical of a system. If it's your biological system, what's at the top of the hierarchy? What would you place as most important? Karen?
Brain.
Brain?
And I think it works. Well, and certainly the core systems, like your heart and all that. I mean, like if your body's getting cold, it tends to rush all the blood there. It's like we'll lose a few fingers to keep the heart going.
Okay, yeah, I'd put brain at the top. Anybody want to debate that? Okay, I'd probably put heart second. But anyway, circulatory and respiratory systems come in close seconds. But even within your automobile, now there's some variance there. Some teens I know would say their stereo system's the most important part. It doesn't really matter whether the car runs or not as long as the stereo works. But within any system, there's a hierarchy of significance among the parts, and that's the point of this. Okay, change and adaptability we touched on, but the system has to change in order to adjust. If the mother has to move into the hospital with a child that has cancer, the rest of the family system has to cope with that. If the family loses a member due to death, or they just pack up and leave, or whatever the case may be, you lose a family member, you have to cope with that. The oldest child graduates from high school, goes off to college, the family has to adjust. The last child leaves the nest, empty nest syndrome, the family has to adjust. You're still a family, but now you may be scattered halfway around the world. And I think of one mom who lost her spouse, and then one son ended up in school in England and another ended up in Pennsylvania, and there's still one girl here. They're still a family, and they're a great family, but gee whiz, they've had to change and adapt. And when they come back home, they have to adapt again. And when all the relatives come in at Christmas, my goodness, don't we change and adapt? Okay, you want to add something?
You were talking about changing and adapt for coming home. I was a sophomore and had a freshman roommate, and she talked to me that summer. I got letters from her the summer after that when she was talking about how hard it was to go back home and suddenly have to live by mom and dad's rules again, when having tasted that freedom to choose the rules yourself.
Mm-hmm. Right. And we have lots of adjustment to do there. Okay, we said a closed system is like your watch. An open system has exchange with the environment. Okay, systems take input, they transform it into output. The university takes semi-ignorant freshmen and educates them and enlightens them and hopefully graduates them back into the community. And then the community says, what brilliant people, send us more, and so forth. But we've turned that input into output. So whether it's a Idaho potato becoming a potato chip, or a freshman becoming a valuable national news commentator or engineer or whatever. It's the job of the system to have this exchange with the environment. And this is an ongoing process. Okay, now up here under equilibrium or balance, we're going to pick up, this is, all of systems theory was developed by a guy named Burton Lanfey, if you ever decide to look him up. But the idea of balance is taken further by a fellow named Theodore Newcomb, who gives us the term strain, or the concept strain towards symmetry, and says that if the system is not in balance, then there's a strain towards symmetry. It's not that we just sit around going, oh gee, it'd be nice if our system got back in balance. You know, it's a straining, often frustrating, stressful, if not crisis-oriented thing that's occurring. And when this happens, people try to change each other's attitudes about ideas and objects, or they change their attitude toward the other person. You know, if it may be something as simple as raw onions. I hate raw onions. And if you love raw onions, and we like each other, then we're going to have to work something out. Okay, you have to promise not to eat raw onions around me, or I have to get a nose clip so I don't smell the onions. You know, we've got some choices here. I can try to convince you that the onions aren't good for you. You can try to convince me that I really should like them and they would make my hamburgers wonderful. See, and this is a minor thing. Well, relatively minor. To me, it's a big deal. Maybe it's a question of dill pickles or sweet pickles. Yeah, go ahead.
A good example is the smoking.
Mm-hmm.
To adapt to that, the smoking section, or like when they had the planes where you could smoke in one section and you may be in the next row and you're dying.
Yes. Yeah. And so there's that strain toward symmetry or strain toward balance. And if it's your spouse, you know, sometimes people get married and they both smoke, and then 10 or 15 years later, one of them quits. Oh my. We've got strain. You know, we have to buy room fresheners and air filters, and, you know, one has to smoke outside or in their room, or, you know, there are all kinds of conditions and things. But this is the way we are. And whether you're trying to convince somebody about abortion or gun control or cigarette smoking or raw onions or changing jobs or quitting your job to stay home to raise the children, you know, all these existential type crises produce great strain on the system. And when it's there, we work toward this, we try to get balance back. And so Newcomb gives us the term strain towards symmetry to describe what's happening. But we sometimes change our attitude about the idea, well, the onions aren't so bad after all. If you chop them up really fine, and if I can get you to saute them even a little bit, you know, but then they're not raw anymore. Okay. You may change an idea toward the object. You may change your attitude toward the person. I didn't really need that person in my life anyway. And so you check out from that. Okay, we were talking about non-directive counseling earlier, and that has a lot of its roots in the work of Carl Rogers. And another term that Carl Rogers gives us is unconditional positive regard. I'll get this straight on here. Unconditional positive regard. And he says this is what people need. You know, we play so many roles and we wear so many hats and we try to be perfect and do all kinds of things. And what we need is for people to accept us where we are for who we are. And we need threat-free environments, and we need unconditional positive regard. I like you because you're you. You know, not because of what you wear, not because of how you dress, not because of what you can or can't do, but because as a human being you have intrinsic value. And for that reason, I like you. And if we can develop that mindset, that's a helpful one. Okay, another little shorty here, but we're trying to look at some of these theoretical perspectives because they're going to help us as we figure out what people are doing and why they're doing it. Attribution, and some of these we call theories, some we call concepts, without bogging down in it. Theories tend, like system theory, tend to enable us to predict what's going to happen in a situation. System theory we call a theory because we know that a system will try to get itself in balance. We know that interdependence occurs and that a change in one part produces a change in another part. Okay, so attribution theory gives us some information about how people will respond. Attribution theory from Hyder and Kelly says people perceive behavior as being caused. You think about that. We assume behavior is caused. The cause can either be in the person, the perceiver, or in the environment, or in the person doing the perceiving of the situation. But number 3, we assign such causes systematically. If somebody's not in class, oh, they're not in class tonight. I wonder why they aren't here. Well, maybe they had car trouble. Maybe they were running. Maybe there's a family. We start looking for causes of behavior. And the better you know that person, the better you're able to predict. If it's your spouse is late for supper, well, do they have to work late? Do they have car trouble? Which freeway do they come on? Is the toll road likely to be jammed up? Is the Southwest Freeway likely to be jammed up? And so forth. And then we rank order those causes. Well, what's the most likely to have happened? Was there probably a wreck on the freeway, but they might have had to work late. Or probably they had to work late, but there might have been a wreck on the freeway. But we know that people do this. And so we call it a theory because it predicts how people will respond in a situation. Now, this is important because number 4, the cause impacts the perceiver feelings and behavior. If you think they were just stupid and forgot, you're going to have a very different reaction than if you think there was a traffic jam and they just couldn't help it. Okay? Person burns a hole in your new sofa with a cigarette. You're going to be annoyed either way. But if you truly believe it was an accident, then you'll be frustrated and deal with it. But if you think they were irresponsible and did it carelessly, then you may terminate a friendship or have a real explosive situation or whatever. So you can think through situations like that. But what you perceive to be the cause makes a big difference in how you handle the situation and in what you communicate to the other person. And then 5th and finally, one cause will be discounted if others are plausible. If a wreck on the freeway, that's reasonable, then you'll rule out other things like the person is probably dead because they ran under a metro bus. Okay, I finally have a chuckle up here. Okay, some things are just more plausible than others, even though these others are possibilities. Okay, now we're going to look at the final theory of, there's debate about whether this is a theory or just a taxonomy. You can't predict very much from transactional analysis, but you can use it as a useful taxonomy to explain what's going on. So let's take a look at this. And if your puppets get motivated to take on an ego state, you'll let me know. We've got some decorated really cute out here that haven't made their debut tonight. Transactional analysis comes from the work primarily of Eric Berne, also of Thomas Harris. Berne had a book a couple of decades ago, Games People Play. Thomas Harris had one, I'm Okay, You're Okay. I think it was Harris who had What Do You Say After You Say Hello, that looked at how people use 3 ego states, parent, adult, and child, and respond from those, and we'll look at those a little more in just a moment. They have transactions with one another that may be complementary, crossed, or ulterior. And I'll put some different visuals up in just a minute that will help to clarify that. And then we recognize that people play games with each other. And as defined within TA philosophy, games are destructive. Games are hurtful to one another. They have negative outcomes. It's not games like Ring Around the Rosie or Monopoly or something, but it's, now I've got you, ha ha ha, or look, see what you made me do, some things like that. Okay, we also get from this approach the notion of strokes. You may have heard of cold pricklies and warm fuzzies. Well, that comes out of transactional analysis, and that people need positive strokes. We need warm fuzzies, but often what we get are cold pricklies. And when we get cold pricklies, then we're uncomfortable, and it's an unpleasant kind of situation. And the notion of scripts, that we play out scripts. Somebody may play Little Red Riding Hood and be a damsel in distress for years and years, or we find people, maybe it's a guy playing chivalry or some, Sir Lancelot or whatever, knight in shining armor, so forth. We find people who get in destructive scripts and games. There may be a divorce, and then they'll go right back and marry the same kind of partner again, and get back in that same role because it's a comfortable role, even though it has negative outcomes. So we'll come back to this part. Let's go back and look at the ego states a little more fully. The parent ego state, and we said the ego states are parent, adult, and child. The parent may be positive or negative. What do you think would be some characteristics of the positive parent state? Okay, Robert?
They would be understanding, but yet firm.
Okay, firm, understanding, nurturing, the things parents do for you that are good. You want to add on, Karen? Or?
Offer rewards, offer, because, classic example, I suppose, yes, my mother, it's one of the things I guess I miss. Even when no one else sent me a Valentine, I could count on my mother would always send me a Valentine.
Yeah, there are just some things moms do. I had an aunt, my mom was good too, but I had an aunt that played that parent role too. She only had one child and would have been happier with more, and so she did that nurturing sort of thing from as early as I can remember. Okay, the positive parent then is this nurturing, caretaking role. Okay, the negative parent is the prescriptive, judgmental one. Now you got some tapes running through your head of what the judgmental parent says.
I had an experience through high school. My brother and sister both had full athletic scholarships to college for different sports, and going through high school I was always pushed. I was a swimmer, and I was always pushed, well, when you get your scholarship, when you get this, and I felt in my mind that if I didn't, I would be judged. So I pushed myself and accomplished it, but it wasn't what I wanted because I was afraid of being judged. That was
okay, and that's actually a game. When is a game? When I get to high school, man, will I be cool? I have to study. When I graduate and get to college, then it'll all be great, right? But when you all get out of college and have real jobs and real income, no, you get a new set of problems. So this when game, which they were imposing on you, is a self-destructive game. And if you can recognize that, if only I were born rich, if only I were born skinny, if only I were born beautiful, if only I didn't have a wart on the end of my nose, if only my eyes were a different color, then everything would be wonderful. Some people I know that I think are absolutely beautiful and handsome worry about a mole that's over here, or you know, which way their cowlick does or doesn't go, and on it goes. I mean, those are self-destructive kinds of games. Did we pass by what you were thinking?
Oh, I was thinking about the parent that always makes comparisons about little Johnny down the street. Why can't you do as good as if you would make the honor roll, etc.?
Okay, yeah, that's that critical thing. Karen?
I was also thinking there is sort of a negative aspect to even some of the positive parent thing. You can be nurturing and sort of not want to let go of that role. Maybe when somebody's ready to be independent, but you still kind of like to nurture, or you still want to. So I knew somebody who at 16 or 17 or 18, and her mother did a lot of, I think did a lot of things for her, and ultimately I started to conclude that this person I was having some struggles in interacting with her, and realized that I think she had started to interpret that how people cared when she knew people liked her or whatever was demonstrated by because they would do things for her, and had also ultimately, so I could observe that she would sometimes work 3 times harder to get you to do something for her than it would have taken to simply go do it herself.
Okay, and now we're getting in some interaction. So here's kind of hold that thought, because we're getting transactions between people in order to accomplish goals. Okay, I'm thinking of tapes that you may have in your head that are kind of one-liners from the negative. I'm thinking, you know, put your boots on before you go out in the rain. Did you get your coat? Did you remember all your school books? Did you do your homework last night? These are some leftover tapes that I have, but they're the prescriptive parent. They're not necessarily bad, but it's this prescriptive role. Did you brush your teeth? Did you wash behind your ears? Did you wash your hair? Oh, yes. Yeah. What are some more mom lines, Ginger? Yeah, we always use lots of soap and had bubbles everywhere, but yes, someone we know forgets to use
There's
soap.
the classic, always put on clean underwear so that in case there's an accident, you're going to look decent.
Yeah, okay. Do you have on clean underwear? Did you change your socks? You know, aren't those the ones you slept in last night? Okay, and so these are parent roles. Okay, now the child, and remember these are ego states, so we're going to find that within each one of us, all 3 of these things occur, parent, adult, and child. There's a component of each one in each of us. Okay, the child ego state is both positive and negative. The child in you is uninhibited, may be filled with wonder and joy, but is also rebellious and self-indulgent. It's the part of you that wants to, and maybe sometimes does, stomp its foot and have a temper tantrum. And when you have reached your limit and rebel, yeah, it's also the part of you that finds a rationalization for eating a whole quart of ice cream in one evening as you watch TV. Melanie?
I have a boss who is so childlike, and he's
not going to watch this tape, is he?
But during our funniest part of, I work in a restaurant, and he's our owner / chef. And during the end of the evening, when he gets very, very stressed out, the funniest thing for us, and it shouldn't be funny, but it is when he just throws back his head and screams. And we all look at him, and it just tickles us so bad because that's our highlight.
Mm-hmm.
Because we know that he's hit his
the
limit.
uninhibited child coming, you know, ah, whatever it may be. It's the part of you that likes to pull your shoes off and be barefoot in clover, or eat an ice cream cone, or go, you know, walk the beach. Just
wait in the puddles after it rains.
Wait in the puddles after it rains. Swing, unless you have to take Dramamine to swing. But you know, that uninhibited part. Karen?
The part of me that wants to stay up late, and it's been a real shock for that part of me to discover that as I'm getting a little older, you know, I pay for it a lot more the next day than I used to.
Now, but that sense of, and maybe still for you, it's just a neat, cool deal to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning, to go out for breakfast at 3 a.m. No, I crossed a line somewhere. It's not nearly as important as it used to be.
It's still a big deal for some of the other people at my house.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it seems to be just vital to be out until 5.
Well, that's your child ego state coming through. One of the best examples I ever saw of this when Hobby Airport was under remodeling and they had all the luggage coming through the conveyor belt upstairs where that lounge is now. Here we came in tired Sunday. You know what Sunday night airport traffic is like. And here are all these people waiting for their luggage. And we're just kind of leaning on the wall. It's summer. It's hot. The bag's nowhere in sight. All the travelers are disgruntled. But in nothing but diaper is this 2-year-old who is down near the conveyor belt, far enough back to be safe. Every time a suitcase came by, he jumped for joy. Just delighted that a new suitcase went by. Now that's a child ego state. But it's the wonder and joy part. And we've all got it in us. It's just sometimes it gets buried under the prescriptive parent, under the critical parent, even under the adult, which we're going to come to next. The adult we think of as the rational part. Okay, this is the rational decision-making self, the level-headed part of you that stays calm and collected, whatever the situation. Okay, now when we find my artwork here, when we get all of these parts together, and you really could draw a big circle. Here's person 1 and here's person 2. Okay, I didn't want to get this too muddied up. When you get an expected transaction, okay, we call it a complementary transaction. You get what you were expecting. So it could be parent 1 talking to parent 2. Oh, look what the youth of today have come to. Parent 2 responds. Parent ego state responds. Ain't it awful? And that's a game we play sometimes too. Ain't it awful? Look at the plight the world is in. Now, as they can sit there over coffee at great length, discussing the demise of the world, the demise of youth, the demise of the planet, whatever it may be. 2 critical parents can have a real good time with each other. And on they go. Okay, but sometimes we get an unexpected transaction. Okay, maybe my adult addresses your adult. We're painting and remodeling. We're working in the garage or something. And I smack my thumb with the hammer. Ouch. I need a Band-Aid. Or, oh, I hurt my thumb. Do we have some ice? Well, I addressed your adult. Do we have any ice? But instead of your adult saying, yes, there's some ice over here in the cooler, may I get you some? Your critical parent responds. What might a critical parent say, Melanie?
You really should watch where you put your fingers and not get them in the way of the hammer.
Okay.
Or whatever. Be careful when you're hammering nails or whatever.
Okay. You stupid idiot. Can't you even hit a nail with a hammer? Or if I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times to let me do the hammering around here. Or to let your father do the, whatever it may be. What I add on? Okay. If we get some puppets motivated out there to transact, they can feel free to do that. Okay. Sometimes we get what's called an ulterior transaction. And here we have two messages going on at the same time. The adults may be carrying on one conversation at the verbal and the ulterior transaction is occurring on two levels, verbal and psychological. And the verbal purports to be the real conversation, but the nonverbal messages and so forth are really coming over the psychological level. So one adult may say to the other, and it's the adult ego state, you may be 19 years old, you want to go to the library and study tonight?
Ooh, I'd love to go to the library and study tonight.
I got a little response out here. Okay, now that was an adult response. Now here we have an appointment to go to the library and study. But what took place on the psychological level?
At least from one half of the conversation, there's at least a hope that studying may not be all that's going to occur.
Yeah. And when there's a discrepancy between the verbal and the nonverbal, which one are we going to take? The nonverbal. Now we'll take that ulterior message.
Well, I think it's because from experience we learned that's generally the more honest one. We'll fake a lot of verbal messages. It's much harder to fake the nonverbal.
Are you thinking of an example?
Well, I think there's a lot of classic cases of someone maybe trying to tell you, maybe telling you that someone may be saying, I like you, but you're looking at that smile and it looks very fake and they're backing away or something. You're going to know they need to sell me this car, so they're going to tell me they like me, but I know that their behavior says they don't.
Okay, and so you're reading into those facial cues as well. Okay, yeah. No.
I hear a lot with guys. Having an older brother, I heard a lot of this. One of their friends would say, "So did you have fun with so and so?" "Oh yeah, we had a lot of fun." Mm-hmm. And then through that, they read. That's just an example of something that I always had to put up with, having men around the house all the time.
Yeah.
I have one I face every night. I have 3 clocks in my bedroom. So I'll say to my husband, I need to get up at 5:30. So I set the first clock at 5:30. But inside my mind, I'm thinking the second clock's 6. So I could sleep a little later, and I usually wake up at 6.
Okay, so you're playing a game with yourself. Okay, why don't you just get a snooze bar? Some of my best friends and I have snooze bars.
I learned that from college. I had to, years and years ago, I used to have to put them in each corner. So by the time I got to the furthest one, I'd actually
you wake up a little bit
out
each time that you get up and back and forth. I see. Okay. No, I just have an internal clock, reaching over and slapping it. No, I can slap it 3 times before I really have to get up. But if I wait till 4, then there's a crunch. Okay. Yeah,
On the ulterior, I think one of the reasons sometimes it's both message. Well, you'll be getting. I guess it's sort of the mixed message thing of you'll be getting theoretically you're getting one message, and yet you start to figure out the person really means something else. I do a lot of temporary work, and I had an assignment recently where I was being told that I should be sure and get my lunch, that I should be back by 2 o'clock because certain things would start occurring about that time. And yet, as it got really close to 1, the person also came in and would deliver numerous tasks for me to do, all of which they sort of expected me to get done before I went to lunch. And after a while, I started to figure out that the hidden message was they really didn't want me to go to lunch. Now, I insisted on doing it, but as I say, adult to adult, the message was, now just be sure you're back by thus and such time. But there definitely was an ulterior message coming across. It took me a little while to figure it out, but I went, oh, this person certainly didn't want to pay me for work I would do on my lunch hour. They weren't going to pay me for more than 8 hours a day, but they really wanted the work done.
Okay, and in that case, you're back into a game playing situation again. Now I've got you. And in the book they call it Now I've Got You, USOB. But But the point is we entrap, well, maybe we don't do it, but people entrap one another. They set them up to fail. They set them up to get in some kind of a double bind that generates a crisis. And if you had chosen, that could have created a crisis. What, do I do the work? Do I go to lunch? Do I try to do both? How much faster can I tread water before I sink? Which increases stress, which creates additional overload.
That particular assignment generated a lot of stress, and in fact, I've heard from the agency that particular assignment they were having a very hard time keeping anyone very long in that particular one because of that very reason, that there was a lot of stress related to this particular assignment, that you were made to feel like if you didn't get a certain amount of work accomplished in the time, that you were slow and maybe a little efficient, and you found yourself starting to stay a little after and get it finished, but not charging for it. And it wasn't a while until I suddenly realized I was playing the person looking for Rumpelstiltskin. I kept going, I was trying to turn the straw into gold and kept going, so when's Rumpelstiltskin showing up and saving me?
Mm-hmm. And I was trying to think of the name of it. There's another game called See What You Made Me Do. And if we're not careful, we let people push us like this, and then we mess up and get in a situation. Or sometimes we set ourselves up for failure, but then blame it on the other person. And then we can say, well, see what you made me do.
Especially if it's people who choose to live in crisis.
Oh,
People who have one
do we
crisis.
know some people who live in crisis?
We know people who live in crisis, but people who choose to have one crisis after another or to make everything in their life into a crisis, that tends to happen. And they suck you into it if you're not careful. If you don't pay attention. Because especially as a caregiver, which I assume most of the people who take this class are caregivers one way or another.
Or at least you're working on becoming that. But there are, and you may well look around you and see that there are people who live in crisis. We get to codependency later on in more length, but and depth, whether or not you contribute to somebody else's ability to keep having crises. And if you keep fixing it for them, they can keep having more. You want to?
And I've also realized, we kind of alluded to it earlier, that there's a tendency to sort of set yourself up for a little more stress. You put off doing the paper. And I started to realize that I tended to maybe overcommit myself to create a little stress. And I think it's because, I don't know, I'm beginning to wonder if I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. I like that feeling of I'm getting, 5 things done in 3, what would normally take 3 to do. And so I think I like that feeling of, hey, and certainly, yeah, the creative juices do flow.
I'm a superhuman because I can juggle 6 things at once. Or
I wonder why occasionally one of them falls down and goes crash.
And so what the ulterior transaction is saying on a single sentence kind of basis, we've drifted into some game playing here, and the games often involve these ulterior transactions where the messages are taking place on 2 levels. Here, let me help you. I'll help you all right. You'll be drowning by the time I get through helping you. This sort of thing. So sometimes it's a verbal, nonverbal level that's taking place. And people vary in their adeptness at sorting these things out. If I say, oh, so nice to have met you, Julie. And she goes, oh, did she mean that or not? I don't think she meant that. Or I say, that's a really interesting outfit, excuse me, that you're wearing. Yes. Did somebody say that to you today?
A week ago.
A week ago. Sometimes there just aren't words. You look very nice tonight, though, so maybe you'll have to wear it for us. And
It sounded too familiar.
Speaking as the person who's sometimes been feeling like you need to say something nice to this person, and yet you're sort of horrified, I've learned, interesting is that word that's kind of the catch-all, and so, of course, when you hear it, directed at you, you learn to, to really take that with many grains of salt and think, okay, what possible, permutations of interesting does this person mean?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to find anything constructive to say about combat boots. So, what did you say when Nikki dyed her hair black? Her daughter, who has lovely golden brown hair under normal conditions.
Oh, well, when she went to have her school pictures taken, and she wanted to wear black lipstick, I told her that I would enjoy remembering that she liked wearing really dark lipstick in the 8th grade, but I would love remembering that she chose not to wear black but wore wine for her school pictures. And so she did.
And so she did, and that helped.
Because she's real fair. And with
I
black
told her
hair
she
and-
looked like Elvira.
But her hair's
That
turning
probably
brown.
went fine.
Well,
And that's an interesting comment because my hair is actually, I've actually darkened mine some from what it would be normally. And my aunt, who hadn't seen me in quite a few years, she was somewhat horrified and said, "You look like a gypsy." Now, and I realized that was for her and perhaps that generation was a negative comment, and I have to admit,
I don't know what's so bad about
I
that.
actually kind of took it and said, "Hey, that's kind of neat."
Yeah. Yeah. And Elvira really wasn't meant as an insult. That was just who she reminded me of. Lily white skin and coal black hair. But we adjusted to it. Now that it's growing off, we've adjusted to it. And, so. But when we communicate out of these ego states, parent, adult, and child, it's either complementary. If my child addresses your adult, your nurturing parent, that's what I expect in return. If your negative parent addresses her negative parent and gets that response, it's still complementary. It's when you get an unexpected result that it's a cross transaction. And that's the key to it, whether it's expected or unexpected. Yeah.
So you could be, say, as a prescriptive parent, be addressing someone else, even someone in this class or something, be addressing their child, and as long as that's what you're expecting back or they were expecting, it's still complementary. It doesn't have to be same level to same level.
Oh, sometimes people turn a term paper in late, and I may beat you with a wet noodle. Now you really know, you knew when this paper was due, you know that you should have bought an extra ribbon for the computer printer. I cannot believe that this is what you're telling me. This paper is late because at 3 a.m. you didn't have a ribbon for your computer printer. And da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay. The student could fly off on me, which would be an unexpected response probably. But the child ego state is probably going to say, "You're right, Dr. Hahn. I should have done better. I'm really sorry." The child is going to take the spanking, the verbal spanking, the wet noodle lashing, and go with it. Now, in contrast, I've had people come in wanting me to beat them with a wet noodle, whining and lamenting a story. And if I've got my wits about me, I'll respond from an adult ego state and say, "This was your choice. It's your grade. It makes no difference to me. You know the consequences of a late paper, and if you choose not to plan ahead, that's your choice. I'm not going to stand here and scream at you or beat you with a wet noodle." But it would have been such a cathartic experience. I'd have felt so much better if I could have taken my beating now and known that my grade was going to be okay. But it didn't work that way.
no, but thank you for asking.
Right. So, okay, one other thing we want to look at here that comes out of transactional analysis is the notion of life positions. And obviously the healthy life position, it says I'm okay and you're okay. It ties back into what Carl Rogers was saying about unconditional positive regard. I think it has some roots and transference there. It doesn't say you are wonderful, you are incredible, you are the most fantastic person on the face of the earth, and I'm running you a close second, or we're tied for being superhumans. Now, we may think that and discuss that on a different date. But this life position says, I take you as you are, flaws and all, and you're okay. And I'm okay too. I've got some glitches. I make some mistakes. There's some problems with who I am, but I've accepted those and I'm okay. You're okay and I'm okay, and so we're going to get along through life okay, recognizing that none of us has, yes. Too many okay.
I'm just getting a kick out of this whole theory. I'm going down the list looking at, I'm okay, but you're not okay. I'm not okay.
Yeah,
you are okay.
Okay, let's project ourselves. If some puppet wants to take on role 2, that would be great. I'm okay and you're not okay. Put those puppets on. All right. Now remember to hold down your mics if you have anything to say. But I want you to get, even if you don't say anything. If I've got a couple of people that don't get into this, and that's okay if you don't see a puppet on me either. And Darren, we didn't send a puppet out to you. Sorry about that. Get you a brown lunch bag. Okay, but get that puppet psyched up. I'm okay, and you're not okay. I'm okay, and you're not okay.
It's almost like a child saying, maybe if they do well in a spelling bee or something, saying, I won the spelling bee and you didn't. I'm better than you are.
Yeah, it's the life position. I'm better than you are. Come on, get real cocky here. Get your attitude on. Because what are you going to say? What kind of things are you going to say? What are you going to do? How are you going to treat the people around you if you're okay and they're not? Robert?
I'm a major professor at a major university with 25 years of tenure, and you're just here, you're just a TA, and you're going to tell me that my program is not going to work right? It's like that kind of...
Okay, you poor dumb little undergraduate.
You have no idea
you think
all
you're
the
going to pass this course. Yeah. Okay, good. Nancy?
A good one is, isn't it obvious that I'm right? You know, and obviously you're wrong. You know,
Yeah.
You know, that kind of, I can't believe that you wouldn't agree. Doesn't everybody agree with me?
Yeah, you're brilliant and the rest of the world is just stupid. Now, if you're okay and they're not okay, what can you do to them? How can you treat each other?
People who are not okay, you sort of have permission then to treat as inferior, as less worthy.
Yeah, particularly if you've decided they're not okay.
Oh yeah, it's I'm okay. I was born from the upper crust. Thank you very much. And you're just
I
never
can
going.
see the silver spoon in your
Yes,
teeth. Yes.
and you're just never going to cut it. You're never going to be. You just are from inferior genetic stock, and you'll never be able to catch up. That's all there is to it.
Okay, so what can you do to me if I'm inferior?
I can just simply inform you that you will never be admitted to the clubs to which, you know, and we will
Make yourself
never,
feel better.
you know.
Make
Yeah, here I am, a major professor with 25 years of tenure, and I can't get into a club. She's okay and I'm not. Now that puts me in life position 3. I'm not okay and you are. Okay, were you going to add one here?
Well, this whole, the second one, what?
I'm
I'm
okay
okay
and
and
you're
you're
not.
not. It's a person that invalidates those around them.
Okay. Yeah, you just treat the people around you like scuzz of the earth. You ostracize them from clubs. You kick them around figuratively, literally, economically, politically, socially. Okay? And we have outcasts in our society, and that's a segment of the population that's in crisis. They aren't smart enough. They aren't rich enough. They aren't beautiful enough. They aren't enough. They aren't okay enough in whatever category we've picked. And it ties back into the hierarchy thing. You know, because if we don't fit these hierarchies over here, then we may make up our own hierarchy.
And of course, teenagers fall into that trap very easily. I'm not okay because I don't have the right jeans, and I don't have the right shoes, and I'm not driving a car, I'm never going to get a car, you know, and I am obviously, you know.
Okay,
and
now
I'm
you're
a
leading
nerd.
us into slot 3. Yeah, and think about, well, let's stay on 2 for just a minute. What is the ultimate extreme of 2? If I'm okay and you're not, in a pathological sense.
You deserve to die.
Yeah, I can take a gun and blow you away in an instant. You know, I can go to the top of the UT Tower and kill people like flies. Or I can bomb something, you know. People are expendable, and that's the extreme of position too. That if I am so okay and so fine and you are so not okay, I can do anything to you. I can steal from you, I can manipulate you, I can rob you, I can kill you, I can abuse you, which leads us into battering. Okay, and you see that mindset? Okay, now flip it over. I'm not okay and you are. Or you're not okay and I am.
Typical adolescents.
Okay.
They all go all go through it, and
Finally,
everyone else is better.
okay, occasionally you find an adolescent with healthy self-esteem for brief moments in time. Okay, but most of the time you're not okay, you know, or somebody's always more okay than you are. The brand on their butt is better, their tennis shoes bounce higher, or the lights light up brighter, or in more colors. Okay, what's the extreme of this condition? It's more than just social groups and
The extreme
closed.
that I experienced in high school was suicide pacts. We had suicide pacts, 3 people in a row, because they were unhappy. They didn't deserve to live.
Okay, you are so not okay that you don't deserve to live. Okay, is that what you were going to say? Or?
Was essentially the same thing I was thinking of. Or you simply are a willing participant now with the person who will validate your not okayness. You're willing to play the rug for the person who likes to step on you, you know, and you'll stay there and take it. Again, somewhat of the battered wife thing. After a while, you start believing the message you've been getting, and so you stay there because that's all you're worth.
Yeah, and this is a real life position. I'm not okay, and you are. You know, who besides battered wives fits in there?
Maybe in employment, your boss can invalidate you. Maybe like.
Okay,
I
you
was
lose
saying
your
with-
job, you've been a CEO, you've just been a good employee, and you're out of work, and you're not okay. What else makes you not okay?
Oh, end of relationships, you know, love life things. That's, in fact, I had a cousin who, there was a young man who was desperately trying to get her to marry him. I mean, he followed her around Europe and did all kinds of things to try and get her to marry him. And at the time I didn't understand, but I think it's because she was concerned that he felt like she was okay and he wasn't, and she didn't want to be kind of the pinnacle of somebody's life. Because her thinking was, so what if something happens to me, then what do you do?
Mm-hmm. Okay, good example. All right.
What about the classic alcoholic doesn't feel like he'll be okay, so he'll drink extra, so he'll be like the life of the party, or something.
Okay, and the
He'll think of
alcohol
himself as
covers
better.
up the not okayness. Okay, that could be happening. Who else is not okay? Besides adolescence, was there a time in your life that you weren't okay? Not permanently necessarily, but that you hit spurts.
Are you talking about somebody with an inferiority complex?
Well, it's the same thing, yeah. How did you feel in elementary school? Maybe we're all happy, well-adjusted kids. Generally, though, as children, we're not completely okay. You know, look at all the things adults can do, and I'm not okay yet. Not that I'm depressed and suicidal, Robert.
I had an experience in junior high where I went out to go out for the football team, and I found out that I wasn't like A or B team material, and it was really like I had all these hopes and dreams that I was going to be able to be maybe a running back or a wide receiver, when really on like an A or B team, when I only made the C team, and it was like I saw my friends that were going off and getting a lot more prestige because they were on the higher teams or whatever, and I've had this like inferiority complex because of that.
Yeah, it makes you feel not okay. You get a bad grade back. This hasn't happened to anybody here. Bunch of people you know. Anytime you experience failure, or almost anytime. I mean, some of us catch it now and then and go, whoops, blew that one, and pick up the pieces and keep on moving. But anytime it's important to us and you experience failure, you're likely, at least for a while, to not feel okay. Okay? And of course the question is whether you're in this life position all of the time, whether this is a permanent position. And most of us find ourselves shifting back and forth. But generally children are in spot 3. Part of the time they're okay, but part of the time they're not okay when they're dealing with peer crises and social pressure. And kids just get in trouble a lot. I mean, every once in a while you find a child that seems to do most everything right most of the time. But I'm around a lot of elementary age kids, and a lot of them get in trouble a lot. And they're getting cranked on by teachers or by parents or by siblings or whatever. And at least while that's going on, you're in this slot 3 of I'm not okay, but you are.
Well, in fact, to some degree, it's unfortunate, but in order to teach someone that they've made a mistake, you have to kind of make them feel that was not okay.
Right.
And to some degree, I guess, I mean...
And I'm not saying you should never be in these positions.
Because, I mean, there's been some discussion of some psychologists who are trying to, we should never have shame, people should never feel shame. And I remember telling my son, I don't think so. I think, if you've done something wrong, I think you should feel shame for it.
Mm-hmm. And remorse. And right. We don't want anybody to get stuck in one of these positions. That's where the problem is. Okay, slot 4, or position 4. I'm not okay, and you're not okay. What are we dealing with here?
Sounds like the insane asylum. We're all sitting around together kind of going, whoa, we're not.
Oh, I don't know. We could all be having a tea party up on the ceiling and be having a lovely time, and all be okay. Just totally out of touch with reality. So, not necessarily a mental institution. Robert?
I think of the older person. That's what came to my mind, where it's like their life is maybe falling apart around them, and then they look at other people's lives, and instead of looking at the good, positive things in their lives, they see all the bad things that they've done. Well, you've failed to do this, and you failed to do that, and then, or they could be, or an adult or something, not necessarily an older person, but like an elderly, but an adult or something, where they look at their life and says, well, I failed, and now look at your life, you're failing too. So that's kind of the situation.
Okay, good. Karen?
In fact, Robert's comment made me think of all those talk shows where people get on, it's frequently when they bring on their mothers and then blame and say, I'm having horrible problems and it's all because my father. That's right. And I want to just take those people and say, just get a grip and get a life, leave your poor mother alone.
Get over it. Yeah, one of my favorite people pushes the phrase, get over it. Get on with it, get over it. Well, what were you going to add?
Well, in prisons, the prisoners seem to take on a different identity where they're proud of not one being worse than the other, and they keep reinforcing each other. It seems like to not be good, or how to be a better criminal. Or
criminals in training. Okay, yeah, good. Well, we'll pursue that more too when we get to institutions. Okay, just to kind of recap here, we've got 4 life positions you can see listed here. And the idea is we want to try to stay most of the time in position 1, so that we view ourselves as okay and the others okay. Slots 2, 3, and 4 all have pathological implications to them. If taken to extreme, the person may commit homicide, suicide, really bad things can happen. Okay, that will hold us for now. Remember, folks on the delayed viewing, to send those forms in so we'll know where you're going to come in for testing. And remember, we have a meeting on campus on February 25th to talk about term papers and review for the exam in more detail. Thanks.